In this lesson, we are going to find the domain and range of different graphs. Before we begin any questions, let's actually do a little bit of review. Do you remember what kind of symbol this is? Is it greater than or is it less than? Well, the left side, the open wide side right here, that's called the greater than. And the right side, the little pointy part right here, that is less than. So really, when you're writing a number, the bigger number should go on the left side on the symbol. So for example, let's say 8 right here is greater than 5. So that's why the big open wide part will be facing the 8. And the tiny corner part will be facing the 5 because that's less than. Okay, on to our first question. It says state the domain range of the following relation. Now I'm going to start off with the domain. Now domain is basically the set of all possible x coordinates. So here is our graph right here, our relation, and it's going to keep going on, and we want to see what x values does that graph actually hit. Okay, let's start off with this point right here. The x coordinate for that point would be 3. Now the x coordinate for this point right here would be positive 4. And it's going to keep going on, so it's basically going to hit all the different positive x values on the right-hand side. Okay, now let's see if the same is for the left side. So here's the point. It hits the x-coordinate at -3. This point right here hits the x-coordinate at -4. And it's going to keep going on the left-hand side, meaning it's going to hit all the negatives. Now, because it's going to hit all the negatives, we're going to write it this way. We're going to write D for domain and colon and draw that funky little bracket, x and a line. And this line basically means such that. So x such that x is an element, so the E stands for element. So x is an element of real numbers. That's what the R stands for. And close the bracket. Now you might be wondering, what are real numbers? Well, they're positive, they're negatives, and they are decimals and fractions. So real numbers basically counts all the numbers. And again, if you look at our graph, notice this graph is going to be hitting all the different x values, all of them, negatives, the positive, the decimals, the fractions. So that's why we write x such that x is an element of real numbers. Now the range is basically the set of all possible y coordinates. So again, this is our graph right here, our relation, and we're going to see what y values does it actually touch. Okay, so I'm going to put a point right here, and it touches it at the y coordinate of -2. Okay, now let's put a dot right here. What is the y value here? It is -1. Now let's try this one. This one happens to be 0. And let's try the left side. So this one would have the y coordinate of +1, and so forth. Now notice our relation has arrows at the end, meaning it's going to keep going on this way. So it's going to hit all the y values moving upwards. But our lowest y value, or y coordinate, is -2. So it's going to start at -2, and then it's just going to keep going up and up. So how are we going to write that? Well, we write R, capital R for range, then the bracket, y such that y is greater than or equal to, and in this case, it happens to be -2. And then comma, y is an element of real numbers, and then close the bracket. Now, the reason why we write y as an element of real numbers, because everything after -2, it's going to hit all the real numbers, but only after -2. That's why we put a comma after the -2. Okay, let's try our next question. We're going to start off by finding the domain. So here is our relation. We're going to see what x coordinates the relation will actually hit. Okay, so I'm going to start off by making a point right here. The x coordinate for this point would happen to be +1. Now let's make a point right here. The x coordinate would happen to be +3. Let's put a point down here. The x coordinate would be +4. Notice our graph is going to keep going upwards, and it's going to keep going downwards. So it's going to hit all the x values right here on the right-hand side. But notice it's not going to hit any of the x values on the negative side past +1. So +1, and it's just going to move towards the right. Okay, so we're going to write capital D for domain, colon, and the comma, x such that x is greater than or equal to +1, comma, and after +1, x is an element of real numbers, and close the bracket. All right, so the domain is done. Now let's move on to the range. So again, reminder, the range is the y-coordinates. Okay, so let's do a point right here. The y-coordinate would be 0. How about a point right here? The y-coordinate would be 1. Let's go below. This y-coordinate would be -2. If you look at our relation, it's going to keep moving upwards. So it's going to hit all the positive y values moving up. Now let's look down. It's also going to keep going downwards. So it's going to hit all the y values going down as well. So basically, it's going to hit all the y values all together. So let's write that. We're going to do capital R for range, colon, and the funky comma, y such that y is an element of real numbers, and we are going to close the bracket. Once again, I am going to start off by finding the domain. So this is our relation right here. It is a circle. And we are going to see what x values does this circle actually hit. Okay, so let's start off with, let's say, a point right here. Notice here the x-coordinate happens to be 7, okay, +7. And here on the other end, the x-coordinate happens to be +1. Now I'm just putting up all these points in between. If you notice, all the x-coordinates right here are basically in between +1 and +7. So how are we going to write that? Well, we start writing the capital D for domain, colon, and the bracket, x such that. Now, because x is in between two numbers, we're going to write it like this. We're going to have a greater than and a less than sign between it. So the left side right over here says greater than or equal to. Okay, so if you notice on our graph, 1 is basically the lowest number, and everything else is greater than or equal to 1 for our relation. So we're going to write 1 on the left-hand side. So the lower number goes on the left. Now on the right-hand side, it's less than or equal to. So if you look at our number right here, 7, that's the highest number. Everything else is less than +7. So we are going to write +7, meaning the higher number on the right-hand side. And then anything in between number 1 and 7 are elements of real numbers. So don't forget to put that right there. Okay, now let's move on to find our range. So again, that means all the y coordinates or y values that the relation will hit. So the highest number right here happens to be +4. And the lowest number on our graph or relation happens to be -2. Now this point right here happens to be y value of -1, this one +1. Oh, right over here, the y-coordinate would be +2, and this one would be +3. So if you notice, it's hitting all the y values, but those values are in between -2 and +4. So it's going to be like our domain, similar to that, but with different numbers. So we're going to write capital R for range, and the bracket, y such that. Now because y is in between two numbers, we're going to write it like this. Now the left side right here is our greater than symbol. So let's see. The lowest number we have is -2 right here. And all the numbers are greater than or equal to -2. So the lower number will go on the left-hand side. So we're going to put -2 here. Now the right-hand side, that's your less than or equal to. So the highest number we have is +4. And all the other numbers are actually less than or equal to +4. So in that case, the higher number will go on the right-hand side. And then all the numbers in between -2 and +4 are real numbers. So let's put that in there. And then close the bracket, and we finished our question. So looking for the domain, we're going to see what x-coordinates our relation actually hits. So I'm going to make a point right here. Let's see, that hits it at -1. Okay, now what about a point right here? That hits it at +1. And let's go all the way at the end. This here, the x-coordinate would be 3. Okay, well, notice there are no x-coordinates on the right-hand side past the +3. They're actually hitting all the coordinates on the left-hand side of the +3. Now also notice we have arrows at the end of the relation. That means it's going to keep going on the left-hand side. So +3 and all the numbers lower than 3, the graph will actually hit when it comes to the x-coordinates. So how do we write that? Capital D, colon, and the bracket, x such that x in this case is less than and equal to +3. Now all numbers below +3 are actually real numbers. So let's put x as an element of real numbers, close the bracket. Now let's move on to the range and let's see the y-coordinates that our relation actually hits. Okay, so let's do a point right here. The y-value of this point would happen to be 0. Now a point right here, let's say that would happen to be -2. And a point right here, that might be a 2.4. Okay, so if you notice, our graph again is going to keep going on. So it's going to hit all the positive values on the y side and all the negative values on the y side as well. So it's going to hit everything. So we're going to write the bracket y such that y is an element of real numbers and close the bracket. We're finally on to our last question. So we're going to start off with the domain and see what x values our relation actually hits. So I'm going to start off right over here, and if you see, that hits the x-coordinate at -2, and this one also hits it at -2. They're just on the opposite sides. This one here would be -1, this one would be in between here and here, and at the last point, that would have to be +2. So notice, even though we've got the graph being up and down, it's going to basically stop here at +2. And it's going to stop on the left side at -2. So our x-coordinates for our relation are in between -2 and +2. So to write that, we're going to write capital D for domain, x such that, now x is in between two numbers, so we are going to draw our less than and greater than sign. Now this one right here is our greater than sign. So our lowest number is -2, so we're going to put that there because everything is greater than -2. And let's look on the right-hand side. That is our less than sign. So if you look at here, our biggest number is +2. Everything is less than +2. So we're going to put the big number on the right-hand side, and anything in between -2 and +2, x is an element of real numbers. Now let's go on to the range and see what values the relation hits on the y-axis. Now I'm going to start out by making a point. Let's go at the top. Right here, the y value would be +4, and right at the bottom, the y value would be -4. Now, our relation has values that are basically in between the -4 and +4. So see how it hits all the different y values, but it happens to be between -4 and +4. So same thing, we are going to start off by writing capital R for range, colon, bracket, y such that, now y is in between two numbers, so we're going to do our signs. So on the left-hand side will be our greater than sign. And let's see, our number that is low is -4. So basically y is greater than and equal to -4. So that low number will go on the left-hand side. Now on the right-hand side, if you notice, this is our less than sign. So we're going to find a big number. So the big number that we have is +4. Everything on the relation is lower than +4. It's less than. So the number 4 will go on the right-hand side. And anything in between -4 and +4, y is an element of real numbers. Close the bracket, and we've completed our question.